30 to 14, if you were interested. So, and it's only a minute left in the game. So, the community... Go Hawks. So the community has been an integral part of the center's life, and I hope the center's been an integral part of the community. The center itself received from the Iowa City Commission for Human Rights 2 years ago its organization award for its efforts in the community. And so we thought that it would be fitting to end the day with a committee comprised of folks not from the university necessarily, but from all walks of life and all kinds of organizations that represent a broad swath of human rights in our community. And the moderator for our final panel, The Future of Human Rights in Iowa City, the corridor community, and the state of Iowa, is Mr. Harry Olmstead. Harry is an example of an Iowa City resident working to better our community. He is a member of the Iowa City Human Rights Commission, Johnson County Livable Community Policy Board, SEATS Paratransit Advisory Committee, and formerly the organizer of the now-defunct Southeastern Iowa Amputee Support Group. Last year, Harry received the ARC of Southeast Iowa's Hero Award and was the recipient of the 2012 Iowa Rehabilitation Association Chuck Wood Memorial Award. Harry is also the vice chair of our center's advisory board. He grew up in Connecticut, where he trained to be a photographer and was an active outdoorsman before he lost a leg due to a botched knee surgery. Now, he dedicates his time to improving disability and human services in our area. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to introduce to you Mr. Harry Olmstead.
Thank you. Excuse me for not standing, but I'll probably fall over if I did. The panelists we've assembled have extensive resumes. If I were to list their credentials and accomplishments, there would be no time for the panelists to speak. I am sharing just a small sentence or so about each person in order for you to have an idea of their talents and contributions. The Honorable Maggie Tinsman. In 1978, Maggie was the first woman appointed and elected to the Scott County Board of Supervisors. She served from 1978 to 1989. Ms. Tinsman was elected to the Iowa State Senate in 1988 and she served 18 years. One of her many accomplishments in the Senate was the introduction of legislation making human trafficking a felony in Iowa. After leaving the legislature, she formed Breaking Traffic, an organization dedicated to eradicating sex trafficking in Iowa and Illinois. Maggie will speak on human trafficking in Iowa. Maggie?
That'd be great. Thank you very much. I appreciate being here, but I want to talk to you. I have a little one brochure thing that I'd like to give out to you all. But I first heard about human trafficking in 2005 when the State Department told me when I went there as an Iowa senator that they were prosecuting a case in Williamsburg, Iowa, U.S. versus Bowie in Cedar Rapids. This was a kidnapped American girl from Minneapolis, brought to Williamsburg, Iowa, age 13, and forced into a sex club. Well, I commonly thought of this as a problem in big cities and border states in the United States. In fact, before the ambassador said anything about it, he was describing this case, and I was thinking, this really is Arizona, California, New York, Florida. And he said, "Where are you from, Senator?" And I said, "Iowa." He said, "You're perfect. You're in Interstate 80, you're in Interstate 35, 74. You have a giant rural area in which to hide it, but the main thing you have is an attitude that it's not here." That's exactly where it is. The truth is, really, it's everywhere in Iowa. So, throughout the state, We have had various cases, and I'll just mention a few of them. One was in 2008. We had 2 runaway teenage girls, 15 and 16, from Omaha, that were forced into prostitution in Denison, Iowa, which is near Council Bluffs. That was the first case, actually, under the Iowa human trafficking law. Then in Decorah, lovely Decorah, where Luther College is, a 17-year-old Muscatine girl who was in a group home in Waterloo walked away, and she was picked up and held in a home in Decorah and abused and was told she'd be the head prostitute. All cases have been prosecuted with successful convictions, and now we've had Iowa City, Coralville, Muscatine, Quad Cities have all found sex trafficking, so it's all around us. Now these cases were prosecuted first using the federal law and later the Iowa law. U.S. had passed a law outlawing trafficking in 2000 and strengthened the law in 2003, and then actually in 2011 they reauthorized the law on the Violence Against Women Act. Still in 2005, the federal government wanted help from the states by passing legislation to assist in identifying and investigating and prosecuting human trafficking cases. Many states, like Iowa, had no legislation addressing trafficking. In other words, modern-day slavery was legal in Iowa. So in 2006, I drafted some legislation that specifically did the following. It made human trafficking a felony. It said that rights were ensured for victims, and victims were protected to multiple, so their multiple needs would be addressed. We had a comprehensive training program for law enforcement was instituted, and immunity was provided to victims of human trafficking against illegal activities as a result of being trafficked, such as entering this country without a visa or engaging in prostitution. Also, local prosecution and investigation was allowed, as well as public awareness activities, and involvement of state agencies was encouraged. The law was passed. It's 710A. In 2006, unanimously, I might add, which is practically a first, right, Joe? And it was signed by Governor Vilsack. Then in 2007, my concern led me to meet with others who were concerned about this horrible problem, and so I later formed Breaking Traffic, which now includes Family Resources CEO in Davenport, the Davenport Police Chief, a social worker, a Deere & Company employee, the Rock Island County State's Attorney, the former president of Iowa American Water Company, and the founder of the One I-80 Zone, which is also for homeless. And we have an executive director whose name is Kathy O'Keefe. This is a bi-state area, Iowa and Illinois. We believe we should concentrate now on domestic minor sex trafficking, called DMST. That is sex trafficking of American children under age 18 within U.S. borders for the commercial sex industry, to include prostitution, stripping, and pornography. Average age of victims is 13, both boys and girls, and 100,000 DMST are victims and 300,000 are at risk. In 2012, Breaking Traffic began working on additions to the existing human trafficking law, and we added, or the legislature added, explicit language saying that commercial sex involving a person under 18 will be considered sex trafficking regardless of forced fraud or coercion, and that each visible depiction of child pornography constitutes a separate charge, and the ignorance of a victim's age is no defense. Then in 2013, we worked with the Network Against Human Trafficking to form a statewide coalition to annually address human trafficking legislation. So last year, in 2014, the legislature passed, it actually was the Senate bill, which was the really good bill, and then we mushed it around, or we combined it with what the House wanted. So we require now the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy to report to the legislature what resources the Academy devotes to human trafficking training. We also have a $1,000 surcharge for persons convicted of human trafficking, both the Johns, the pimps, and the panderers, and establish a victim service fund in the Office of the Attorney General for victim services, public awareness, and training. Also, the enticement of a minor can include enticement through the mail, telephone, internet, or any social media. And if a suspected prostitute is less than 18, county attorney can refer to the Department of Human Services for child in need of assistance proceedings. And if a juvenile is convicted of prostitution when they were under 18, their record would be allowed to be expunged if no additional crime for 2 years. And finally, Johns who purchase services of prostitutes under 18 commit a Class D felony. Pimps who solicit patrons under 18 commit a Class C felony. And the statute of limitation for certain sexual offenders committed against children is extended from 3 to 8 to 10 years. And finally, the Attorney General can seek warrants to use wiretapping that relate to felony human trafficking. So what is human trafficking? Breaking traffic doing? Quickly, I'll tell you, legislative is one of our advocacy. I've already talked about that. We also do community partnerships to coordinate a victim-centered response to sex trafficking, developing emergency protocols for recent Quad City stings, and training. That means multiple groups include DHS as well, Department of Human Services. We're also heavily involved with awareness. We have a SOAP project, which is Save Our Adolescents from Prostitution, with hotels and the Rotary Club in Davenport. And we monitor Backpage.com, a internet thing. Have you ever heard of it? I suggest you look up and see how many Iowa City people are listed on Backpage.com under escort service. It's total human trafficking. Finally, we have Traffic Jam as a program that we have actually educated 2,000 Quad City students, parents, and teachers, and our goal is to have an awareness program in every high school and middle school in the Quad Cities, and then go statewide. So we want to partner with law enforcement because anything that's put on the Facebook is prime bait for the pimps. So finally, I'll just end by saying there are things that you can do, and that this issue needs wide community exposure, and so that's what traffickers don't like. You could interest in organized churches, synagogues, mosques, any volunteer organization you belong to look at this issue. We'll be glad to provide you speakers, but also you can become a voice. We'll be glad to train you to make presentations. So remember, the law works if we members of the community push law enforcement and do something about it ourselves. So please think about that, and I'd like to end by saying, ask you to remember the words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who said, "If you are neutral in the situation of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of the mouse, and you say you're a neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality." Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Next up is the Honorable Senator Joe Bolcom. State Senator Joe Bolcom is serving his 4th term in the Iowa Senate. He just ran unopposed and won. He previously served for 6 years on the Johnson County Board of Supervisors. Senator Bolcom is the Senate Majority Whip and the chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee. Joe's policy agenda has been diverse. He has worked on health and mental health care reform, clean water, clean energy, progressive tax policies, consumer and worker protection measures, and most recently, the legalization of marijuana for medical conditions. He will speak to us about wage theft in Iowa.
Thank you, Harry. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here and taking time to learn about all the interesting topics that have been presented today. Panelists, if you feel like it, you're not going to see my slides unless you swivel around. How many people have heard of the issue of wage theft? How about new issue for you? New issue? Wage theft is an issue that I've been interested in over about the last 4 years. It's an issue here in Iowa that is at a magnitude is hard to fathom. It's what happens when wages are withheld from somebody that works for somebody in an employment circumstance. It could be people that work at the Sheridan here in Iowa City, for example, or other businesses where essentially people aren't paid what they're owed. There was a report done by the Iowa Policy Project in 2012 that suggested that the magnitude of the problem here in Iowa is about $600 million a year. That Iowa workers earn approximately $600 million that isn't paid to them. They looked at U.S. Department of Labor studies, they looked at data, and they looked at Iowa workforce development data, and basically concluded that it was in the range of about $600 million. Which is an extraordinary amount of money when you think about it. The way it happens essentially is it's people not being paid the minimum wage, people not being given the tips they've earned at the workplace, not paying people sick time that they're owed, not paying people vacation time that they're owed, and basically shorting people the money they make. Also, the impact of wage theft. So if I'm not paying people the wages I'm supposed to pay them, I'm not withholding state taxes. It's estimated that about $45 million in state taxes don't get paid, which kind of cheats the system of all the kinds of things we need to do in state government to fund our schools and healthcare and public safety and our region's institutions. And about $14 million is lost to the unemployment fund. Employers regularly pay unemployment insurance and for them, those employees, and if they're essentially not paying what they're supposed to, they cheat the system, they cheat all of us. By way of comparison, as you think about the magnitude of $600 million, we spend about this in 2016, we'll spend about almost $100 million on the Family Investment Program. That's our basic welfare program that goes to folks that struggle, right? You have to sign up for it. Several $100s a month. We're going to spend $100 million for everybody in the state that needs welfare. We're going to spend about $530 million on food stamps in Iowa. The SNAP program is a food stamp program. We're going to spend $539 million. That helps several 100,000 Iowans get food assistance. The Earned Income Tax Credits, probably the biggest poverty reduction program in the country. The state's program, over the last 5 years, we've boosted and are now spending $66 million a year to help about 200,000 families with their tax return. And I can tell you, getting that $66 million through the legislative process, extraordinarily hard to do. Right? All states, and then finally, or a couple final facts. We have about 30 different tax credit programs that create jobs in Iowa. We're spending, projected in 2016, more than $500 million. And these are programs that help John Deere and Rockwell Collins and virtually every company you can think of. It's a big deal, a lot of resources. The public universities in Iowa in 2016, the total appropriation for all three of the public universities for the state is about $530 million. So the scale of this is enormous. And the challenge that workers face is there are victims. And the victims include obviously the workers, honest employers. Most employers are doing the right thing. They're taking care of their employees. But it really does impact honest employers. When taxes aren't paid, it affects what we pay. It affects Iowa kids. Right now we have about 16% of Iowa kids in poverty. When a low-wage worker gets ripped off by their employer, the kids suffer, okay? And about 33% of families with single moms with kids are in poverty. So when you think about the state's efforts to support struggling families, getting paid what people deserve and have earned is a really important piece of it. So what are some of the solutions? The Senate has moved bills in the last couple of sessions, have not been able to get the House to take it up. Basic stuff. When you get employed, your employer has to tell you what they're going to pay you and write it down, give you a copy of it and keep a copy of it. If there's a dispute later, there's a record. Penalties. If I steal $1,000 from an employee and I get caught, I essentially have to pay the $1,000. There's essentially no penalties in the system. Workers that complain about an employer at the existing workplace have no retaliation protection. If I complain about you and you say, well, you're fired. Okay, so we need retaliation protection. And we have like 1.8 million workers in Iowa. We have, until recently, one full-time person. There's one full-time person doing wage enforcement. We increased that, or I'm sorry, 1.3 million private employees. We have 2 people trying to investigate all sorts of complaints. I'll end with this slide. This is an effort that's been opposed. This simple reform's been opposed by the main business lobby in Iowa. The Association of Business Industry has lobbied against this. The retail folks have lobbied against this. And it's really a disgrace that people work hard for their money. Struggling families need every dollar they can get. And we need to get busy and put some penalties in place and provide some protections for these workers so that they can live with dignity and have work with dignity. Thanks for having me on this panel.
Thank you, Joe. I do want to mention, if you want more information on this subject and get involved, Tuesday at the Center for Worker Justice at 3 o'clock, there'll be a press conference where they'll be naming other corporations in Iowa City that are conducting wage theft. Our next speaker is Dr. Sally Scott. She's a community development consultant and adjunct professor at UI. She is founder and chair of the Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition and teaches a course on community development and human rights for the UI Center for Human Rights program. Dr. Scott will be sharing with us her insights to affordable housing in Johnson County.
Thank you very much, Harry. It's a really wonderful panel to be part of and a wonderful event. So my thanks to the organizers and to all who have participated today. So as Harry said, I'm talking about the future of affordable housing and human rights in Johnson County. And you can see that my slide doesn't have a picture.